All right, so hi Kathy. I'm going to call the Capital Planning Committee meeting to order Friday, February 26, 2021. It is 7:30 a.m. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Law, Chapter 38, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitation on the number of people that may gather in one place. This meeting, the Southborough Capital Planning Committee, will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information in the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and/or parties with a right and/or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the Town of Southborough's website at www.southboroughtown.com. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch or participate in the meeting may do so in the following manner by finding the meeting at www.southboroughtown.com/remote meetings. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event they were unable to do so, despite our best efforts, we'll post on Southborough's website an audio video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of the proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. Note that Lisa is not here yet, but I know she's coming. But in the interest of time, we'll keep rolling. First item is discussion and vote of FY22 capital items not previously voted on. So I went back and independently checked that we had votes on everything. And I think the items we don't have votes on are, we never vote on the defibrillators, but I never heard any objections to those. We obviously have the MIS topic in terms of the servers / storage. And then we've, I guess I would say on the Newton Street water main, kick that to a future discussion, but kind of leaving a placeholder for that, whether it be engineering or construction or nothing. Does that jive with everyone else's view of where we're at?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to start with the easy one. I'm going to move that we approve the police defibrillators for the FY22 capital plan. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All right, roll call vote. Cook.
Aye.
Hark.
Aye.
Hinton-Eater.
Aye.
Palmer.
Aye.
Pfaff.
Aye.
And Malinowski's aye. So that's 6-0. All right. Servers. Did anyone get a chance to watch advisory for those that aren't on the advisory committee to hear that discussion, or do you want one of us to just briefly recap it in 2 minutes?
I listened to it, so you don't need to, from my perspective.
Steve, Joe?
I didn't actually listen to it.
Okay.
I did not listen to it either.
Okay. So in brief, they confirmed essentially the Municipal Technology Committee basically has asked for this $40,000. It may be hard servers. It may be infrastructure upgrades. There may be some version of cloud. They acknowledge that, public safety has, more on-site server needs than, probably any other department. And most of the other departments likely should be moving to the cloud, was at least their expert opinion. So while they don't have a defined plan of how they would use the 40K, there's obviously a scheduling exercise here of, do they wait until the new IT director is on, in which case it may be too late for a town meeting? Or do they, continue with this placeholder with the understanding that they may not spend all of it, because they may come up with a different plan and continue to evaluate it. So I think Kathy and Andrew, at least where I left the conversation, is we obviously have to make the language broad enough to allow them to have some flexibility in what they're going to do with this, but understand that it's around infrastructure for data storage. Would you add anything to what I just said?
No, for me.
I would agree. The only part I was thinking about the other day is if they're buying physical assets, I think certainly a capital article is good. I'm wondering if we should have them add some to their budget so that the following year if we sign up for licensing or software as a service, it's going to be a large jump in their budget year over year by using a capital item and not a capital item. So that was the only part that I'm fine with the 40 or even, spreading it out into different buckets. But that was my only part.
I think that's their intention, Andrew. That's why it's not 45, it's 40. I think 40 is truly intended for hardware. And the extra 5, they assume, can come out of the actual MIS IT budget.
But that's only for the servers, Kathy. So that's the kind of software support for the servers and the software for the servers. But if they want to make more changes to the cloud, right, it would add additional licensing costs. So I'm thinking, more like giving the new IT director some additional funds to do with, but putting some in the budget, some in a capital item. That makes sense?
Yeah, but why don't we leave the 40 where it is? And we're going to readdress advisories. We're going to readdress the MIS budget, and we certainly can modify that budget to do exactly what you just said. Because I agree, that kind of stuff belongs in the operating budget, not in capital.
Okay. And that makes sense to me.
All right, so I'm going to move that. Someone have a question? Steve, is that
No,
you?
I was going to move to that we approve this.
All right,
40,000.
so I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion?
Just Jason, in the motion, do you need to change the titling of it?
I think the intent is very clear in our minutes.
Okay.
What I'm going to ask Brian and Mark to do is they've clearly heard these discussions now, both on advisory and capital, that they work with MTC and or whoever should be involved. If you're an IT director, start tomorrow, to make this as broad as possible so it doesn't limit. I think we all know what the intent is, but just think about that as we word it. But the reason I'm comfortable, Andrew, is it says storage infrastructure. So that, I get it says server, which may be one component, but that's why I think it may be fine as is, but I would defer to those that write, warrants a lot more than I ever have.
But storage infrastructure becomes a physical asset, not a licensing issue. So it's just, or other.
We can change the name of it between advisory and BOS for the meeting. What's important is that there's 40 there and we understand what the intention is. We can always quibble with language before the warrant gets prepared.
I think we know what we're voting on. I'm just meaning, for the meeting.
Capital planning doesn't have to necessarily nail down the exact title of the warrant article.
Yeah.
Or
All right.
the description in the warrant article, sorry.
So I have a motion. I have a second. I'm going to do a roll call vote. Cook,
Aye.
Hark,
Aye.
Antonieter,
Aye.
Palmer,
Aye.
Pfaff,
Aye.
and Malinowski is aye. All right. Next is the actual presentation itself.
Jason, are we going to move or we're going to make a motion to defer Newton Street, or is that?
I think it's still open for discussion. I think we all wanted Karen to come back.
Okay.
But that's got to be at a longer meeting to allow for the right amount of dialogue, I think.
Yeah.
So what I'm gonna do is I have kind of that placeholder in the presentation, like it's just subject to further discussion. But it's, the only thing that's gonna hang out there, but it doesn't impact any of the town's budgeting from a general fund perspective, right? It impacts how the board sets water rates.
Yeah.
So any comments on the presentation itself?
No, I think it looks great. It looks beautiful as always. When you come in from advisory, I'm going to have a suggestion of something to add to it, but it does not have to be done for Tuesday. I think this looks beautiful.
Okay. This is obviously a bridge. This is more for Steve's benefit. We already done this once with the Board of Selectmen back in October. So the assumption is that they remember everything we discussed and that this is kind of what's changed and what we've done and why we've done it. Obviously, there's going to be some verbal overlay to all of this. All right, so I heard from Kathy. Anyone else have comments, questions? All right, does anyone want to make a motion?
I make a motion that we approve the PowerPoint presentation that Jason has prepared for the Board of Selectmen for next Tuesday night.
A second.
Second.
Seconded by Jeff. Any further discussion? I just wanted to thank Brian. He was very helpful in being my ticker and tire to make sure everything that's in this presentation ties to what he's carrying and everything else that he has to deal with from a town perspective, including debt schedules, et cetera. So I thank him for his quick turnaround on this. Obviously, we didn't have much time to get it in order.
And thank you, Jason, too, for putting it together.
Kudos to Brian too. I didn't mean to leave him out. So yeah, it's a beautiful. It's a
Jason
beautiful.
did most of it.
Jason, I know for the tanker truck, it has to be discussed on it and it has a dollar amount. So I think that's covered there. I just wanted to, we didn't, vote on a dollar amount for it.
I think we eventually did. The first time we didn't, and then we eventually did. I went back and looked at the minutes. It's in the February 8th meeting. We did vote. You might have voted no, but we did vote on putting the tanker in. But that was the one where I said the care around when you actually purchase it. But Brian, what I'm hoping, are you going to be there on Tuesday night, Brian?
Yes.
So what I'm hoping Brian can articulate to the board is he's done some longer term thinking about the ambulance fund in the bond, like what bonding he would employ. And that's out there on our share drive as well now at this point. But you'll see this can solely be funded by the ambulance fund, even with a projected decrease in revenue on it. So that is there right now. I get there is the debate of whether the ambulance fund should be contributing more to the general fund, which we're not. That's more of an advisory BOS topic, but that's why it says likely source in the amount. But that's the item the chiefs brought forward. So that's what town meeting should vote on, and I think that is what we voted on, unless someone disagrees.
No, but I would ask Brian to kind of expand when he discusses the ambulance fund can absorb, the amortized cost of it over time. And don't limit that to bonds, because it is, and I think Joe and Jeff were like this, it is looking like a really reasonable thing to think about leasing this one too. Not there yet, but it could be. It looks like it really may be cheaper.
The
So-
ambulance is going to be the key one
But
there. I
I'm
don't
still
think-
saying ambulance fund still funds it, so that's no different, but don't necessarily limit it to bonds. Don't lock yourself into that. Just say it looks like the ambulance fund over time can absorb the cost here based on the current projections.
Andrew, does that clarify for you?
Yeah, my only concern is, does this take any pressure off of the grant cycles? But it is what it is.
I can assure you, I will continue to push the grant very hard, because that is the simplest and easiest way to resolve this. And I would much rather have the
Yeah.
cushion in the ambulance fund for other things that we don't know about yet, probably.
Yeah. As I was saying, like in the notes, just be like, well, we applied for a grant this year. If we get that, we'll obviously use that, right? We're not just going to spend the 400.
Yeah, and look, and I posted a meeting, so if I miss something, Brian misses something, everyone's gonna have the right. You'll be in the room to raise it. So
No, I think you got it. That's what I was just saying. He has the discuss part, so I think we got it. I just
Okay.
wanted to-
But Andrew, you're right. We need to keep, every time we talk about this, talk about grants so that it's at the top of everybody's list, that we need to always keep looking for our grants that are available.
I'm going to add the words grant in progress to this. So A, it's not lost on anyone, and B, we don't forget it. So is everyone okay with that change? That's
Would that be,
When do we hear about that grant? June?
so the cycle closed and they're reviewing now. So we should hear we may hear, depending on when time meeting happens and depending on how high we score or don't score, we may know the fate before town meeting.
sorry, that's for the tanker, just to confirm.
Yes. All right. So we have a motion on the floor. We have a second. We had discussion that added 2 words. I don't feel a need to take a new motion on it. But that was a good point all around. So let's do a roll call vote. Cook,
Aye.
Hark,
Aye.
Palmer,
Aye.
Pfaff,
Aye.
and Malinowski is aye.
Did you get Steve?
Can you go back to Hinternetter?
Yep, sorry, Steve. You popped
okay.
off my
Aye.
screen for a second. Go ahead.
I,
Thank you. So 6-0. All right, standing committee language for town meeting warrant. I put a marked up version. I think Lisa had asked for the assessors department to be in the listing of town finance team. I didn't hear any objections at the last meeting to that. I added language specifically stating that a member of BOS and a member of advisory should always have one of the 7 seats. But I also added language that it should never be more than one from any committee. But I kept it broad enough that, let's just say you had 3 school committee members looking to build a school and they applied to get on the Board of Selectmen. Right, like you're making it fair across the board for, recreation could never have more than one representative on capital, et cetera. So we never really talked about that, but as I wrote item D, I thought E made sense based on not only the conversations this committee's had, but advisory has had in just candidly in fairness to all articles we may have to evaluate moving forward.
I think that makes sense. I think the appointed is the key, because just in case the selectman or advisory wants to have, like, the liaison concept, they're not appointed, so they could certainly attend the meetings.
I don't agree with that, Andrew. Liaisons have always, so the way the liaisons worked in the past is Board of Selectmen has agreed, if it's their appointed committee, that yes, we will let advisory appoint liaison. And we don't have to go much further this morning. We've got time to, we'll discuss this on Tuesday, but the more and more I've thought about it, the more and more I'm convinced that it should be, the advisory person should be a liaison, should not be chair, and should really be there. Their role is to be able to report back to advisory. That's why they're doing this. They still won't be able to vote when they get to advisory. That's not going to change. But their role is really not to let that be their predominant major. Their major is advisory, and they're doing that to help advisory do its work. And since it's such a central committee to finance, it makes sense. But the more and more thing, I just want to make sure that advisory members, their primary role is advisory, and they're doing this to help advisory do their work. So I'm not going to say any more about this. We don't have to talk about this anymore this morning. We'll talk about it Tuesday night with the BOS, and then advisory will talk about it too when we start looking at that article.
So Kathy, in that case, they wouldn't be voting members. We should make them ex officio.
No,
so they
the
can
liaison can
They'd
vote.
then be voting on capital based on what Kathy just said,
Yeah.
not voting on advisory.
Yeah.
Is that how I understood it, Kathy?
Yeah. So let's go back to public safety, Jason, because you know that one so well. I was the liaison to that committee, and I was clearly appointed as a liaison. I did vote, but I did look at my role as liaison to advisory. I would report back to advisory what we did. I did participate in the committee, but I never felt like, I felt like I was there as an advisory member just to make sure that things were going smoothly, and they were. And therefore, was doing my job. I never, was never intended to be chair of that, never anything. Was there to truly watch what's going on and make sure nothing was going off the rails. So I think that's a pretty good model for what I'm talking about here. So in other words, really have a true independent capital planning committee. I wish Lisa were here so she could weigh in on this. So I'm just speaking with the advisory liaison. So the advisory still does its principal work, does not, get wound up in this committee and, think that they've got to just really focus on this and start, not looking at the overall picture, which is what their focus is. But again, this is just my opinion. We'll keep talking but I think for Tuesday, this is great.
I just
think
think
we made much progress.
I think in that case, we wouldn't want to constrain the selectman or the advisory member from voting in that capacity.
Well, you have to, because advisory bylaw says so. It's advisory bylaw that's going to keep them from voting on advisory. They can vote in capital. That's what we're saying. The other committee they're on, they can be on one committee, remember?
Yeah.
So they can vote on that committee, but they can't come back to advisory, then vote on whatever that committee is in front of advisory for. They just have to stand down.
Yeah, I was more concerned about a selectman with only 5 people. Is that an issue for them, or could they still vote?
That's why I wish Lisa were here. So I don't know. Because
They can discuss that amongst themselves on Tuesday night.
Yeah, that makes
Right?
sense.
They could choose to strike it for whatever reason. But we can explain the intent of why it's written that way, at least right now.
That makes sense. I just didn't, for quorum issues, I didn't want to get into that for selectmen. But we'll let them decide. All right.
All right, so I'm going to move that we, for purposes of presentation to the Board of Selectmen, provide this draft for consideration for formation of a permanent capital improvement and planning committee at the 2021 annual town meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All right, roll call. Cook,
Aye.
Hark,
Aye.
Antonita,
I,
Palmer,
Stain.
Bath,
Aye.
and Malinowski is aye. So that's 501. All right. The only other business I have is meeting schedule. So I posted a meeting for Tuesday night. It looks like we're second on the agenda. We're behind MTC. So I'll try to get an idea of if Mark or Marty have any idea of how long that will be. But I did post for the beginning of their meeting just to be safe.
There's 6:30 start.
Yeah. Kathy, do you have any idea?
I'm
of-
sorry for, Jason, for clarity, you're saying that we have a meeting now on Tuesday night with the,
So,
with the Board of Selectmen?
so what we always do, Steve, is we always post a joint meeting when we're going before another board.
Okay,
Obviously, I usually have to be there to present, or anyone that would be sitting in the chair seat would be there to present. But there are often times, especially I'm sure around South Union, that multiple people are going to want to speak. So we post a meeting to cover ourselves from open meeting law. If we don't have a quorum, it doesn't prevent us from speaking. It just means we don't have a public meeting, but we have to post a meeting of 4 of us show up and then speak.
okay.
So he does it just in case, and so it's a safety thing.
Yeah.
So I mean, you have to go, but in case you are there, we're covered.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, I got it.
Yeah, so Kathy, I'm trying to figure out when this group reconvenes, but I'm also cognizant of, FY22 is, the budget really is the only thing, right? Like, is a huge priority right now for a lot of people, including the town finance team. Do you know when advisory may take up capital?
I do, Jason. 'Cause I
Okay,
knew-
do you have the date?
Yeah, so I think 3/24 should be the target date.
Okay,
Okay, if not 3/24, 3/31, so one of those two for sure. And I'm assuming that everybody agrees now, we're done with our work as far as what capital planning has recommended to the BOS, the committee they work under, as far as capital plans, so that we're done. And then now the two kind of top committees will take over as far as what they think, so that there's no more going back and forth, so that we're done with this piece of it. This is what we recommend to the town as far as capital plan for fiscal year 22.
yeah, so my only comment to that would be, like, if they gave us any homework to come back with to
No, I was going to say
for-
absent change. All right,
Yeah.
absent a fact, the changes.
yeah,
what-
I have no intent on revoting anything
we
again
think we're
here
done. We think we're done.
until, yeah.
Jason, we
I'm
voted Newton Street, right? Or no?
No.
Okay, so that's the only one outstanding that we have? Okay,
So all right, so we'll have a posted meeting Tuesday, the 2nd. Kathy will confirm whether it's gonna be the 24th or 31st. Again, we will post a joint meeting with advisory for that night. And then I guess for us, we need to hear from Karen. So what I'm looking to this group is technically we would be due to meet again on the 8th. I'm not wed to that. We could certainly go back a week too. Does anyone have a preference between the 8th and the 15th?
If I'm right, no, I'm wrong. Never mind. So the 15th would be fine. So either one are fine with me.
Anyone else? All right, I'll just do the 8th to be safe. The other thing that may come up in that meeting is the one-stop grant. That's this new 10 grant programs rolled into one that was rolled out about a month ago by the Lieutenant Governor. I'm gonna want to discuss Route 9, in particularly around wastewater and whether we start doing feasibility there based on the prior conversation with Mr. Wood and EDC. So I need to get some more details, but there is like an initial letter of intent that would be due pretty soon. In my understanding, Vanessa has pulled department heads now twice about ideas, and the only ideas that came back, I think, are clearly outside of the intent of that program. So that's going to be the other agenda item for that night. I just don't know the dates of when it's due, but I think you have until the end of the month. So those are going to be the two things to talk about.
So they're rolling, I know a little about this, but not details. They're rolling the grant submission dates for all 10 of the departments that they're now trying to combine into one portal to one time.
Yes.
Okay.
So,
And one of those happens to be something that might give us some money for Route 9.
well, a lot is capital in nature. So I want to talk about Route 9, but I also want to talk about, like, is there anything else? Corderville is the other thing on top of my mind, but, again, trying to make sure we're weighing in on where we think the town should be, aggressive in potentially able to help.
So that's going to be your primary agenda item for either the 8th or the 15th.
Yeah, so I'm gonna go with the 8th unless anyone says no. And there'll be Karen too, because we'll have her here on the water main.
Yep. So this is important. So this is great. I'm glad we're going to jump on this.
Jason, April 2nd is the end date for the applications for the.
Okay, yeah, so that'll give them
Expressions of interest.
basically a little under a month. All right, any other business? I will move that we adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All right, roll call. Cook,
Aye.
Hark,
Aye.
Antonieter,
Aye.
Palmer,
Aye.
Pfaff,
Aye.
and Malinowski.